professor who gathered in his class was speaking one day to his students. He had a question he wanted to ask them. The question was, how can you tell when the night has ended and a new day is beginning? That may sound like an easy question. But one of the students said, well, when you look in the distance and you see two animals, you can tell one is a sheep and one's a dog. The professor said, no. So another person says, well, you can look out and you can see two trees. You can tell one is a fig tree and one's a peach tree. He said, no. And so they all got excited and wanted to know, well, how do you do this? How do you recognize going from darkness into light? He said, if you look at your brother and your sister, or another human being, man or woman, and you look at them carefully, and you see there that they are equal, that they are God's people, you recognize the Christ in one another. That those brothers and sisters that you meet every single day. And what that does, it brings you into the light. To recognize the Christ that's within them. We hear in our readings today about humility. Well, you ask yourself, well, what is humility? Is that putting somebody down or knocking them down or whatever? No. Humility is when you and I can step back in our lives and take a few moments to look at ourselves honestly. To look at all our faults, our failings, but as well to look at our good points, the wonderful things we may have done. When you look at our lives, each of our own personal lives, look at them sincerely and honestly. And then the biggest thing is, can you and I accept what we see within ourselves? That's the question. And once we can accept what's within ourselves, not only are we going to be humble, but we will have light within us. A bright light. You see, we're all called to love one another. We're all called to accept one another, no matter who or what they may be. Yes, we have our faults and we have our failings, but do we recognize those things and move on with our lives? Too often we don't. You take a couple, for instance, decided to get married. But those spouses sometimes have all sorts of expectations of one another, and they're never verbalized. They're never spoken about. What happens down the road? The marriage fails. Because those things weren't discussed before about his or her expectations of each other. Instead of accepting her or him right on as they are, as human beings, and could have gone on with their lives without expectations and everything else. But it happens, especially when you're dealing with an illness like I have to. You see that happen time and time again. The expectations, instead of accepting each other as equal. You see, we're all on this planet Earth. And when God looks down upon this entire planet, on all of us who stand here and work here and live here, what does he see? He sees a field of all equal people. I'll repeat that. He sees a field of people who are all equal. And that's important to remember. That no one's superior to us. We are all on an equal plane. No matter what our talents, whatever else we have, this is how God sees us. And if we see each other as equals, then we can associate and work with one another And what does that do? It brings light into our lives as well as the ones with whom we work and collaborate. No one says it's easy to do that, but to accept what we have, good and bad, that's within each of us, that's the biggest step. That's the most difficult thing, because some people think they're living on some type of planet, whatever. They're not looking at their real life, who they truly are. Does that make God's love less for us because we recognize all of our faults and all the misunderstandings? No. In God's eyes, you and I are equal. Nothing distinguishes us. We treat each other as brother and sister. In doing so, we bring light into this world. That's what love does. It brings light into the world, not darkness. We don't criticize. We don't put people down. We accept them with their faults and failings, just as you want people to accept you. God does. Why can't we? The challenge is there. That's part of humility. But sometimes there's a little thing called pride comes along, just a little thing. And we think we're superior. No, not in God's eyes. We're equal. And those people who have pride, what is it? It only leads to destruction. It leads to unhappiness. But by being humble, we recognize, hey, I have my faults. I have my failings. I also have my good points. And I can use them to help my brothers and sisters in this world. Help lift them up out of their own darkness into light. And that's what we're called to do. That's part of humility. Be humble enough to see who you are. Because God sees you as equal. That we're all equal to one another. And He sees no difference between you, or anyone else. He's given us the grace. He's given us the love. He's given us the power to make a change and a difference in this world. But are we ready to grab a hold of His hand and walk with Him? Are we ready to reach out to our sisters and our brothers? Are we ready to accept ourselves, first of all? And once we are, then we'll begin to look up